All right, welcome everyone. I'm gonna give a couple more minutes for everyone to join before we get started, okay? Can you guys see my screen, okay? Can you raise your hand if you can hear me and also see the screen well? No? Okay, let's see. I know we're about 4 minutes in, so let's wait for just 1 more minute and then we'll get started. All right, so today we're going to talk about the SAT test taking, and some of you may have already joined our SAT diagnostic or have joined the feedback session with your school, but so some of the content may be redundant, but it's still good to kind of learn how to take the test and how to get the best results that you can expect. So first off, my name is Jenna, and if you guys haven't met me, I'm one of the 3 co-founders of Millie, and Millie is a company that's dedicated to helping out international school students around the world. And that we work with schools in many different countries. Our last SAT diagnostic was actually attended by 17 different students from 17 different countries. I myself went through the same cycle as being an international student coming from Korea. And I had to navigate a lot of these things on my own because my parents don't really speak English. And getting into the AP program midway in my high school years. So imagine, if you don't know what AP is, imagine like joining your A-level program or your IB program, GCSE program, like midway in, and then you had to kind of navigate through that process. Long story short, I went to Cornell for undergrad, and then I went to Northwestern for a master's degree and did Columbia and London Business School for my MBA. And needless to say, I have a lot of experience of test taking myself through this process, but also I have a lot of tutoring experiences before starting Millie. And today I'm going to tell you some of the tips and tricks that we incorporated at Millie, and also things that we learned, or myself and our mentors learned in the past 10 plus years of working with students and doing the test taking ourselves. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, here's my Instagram handle. On the bottom, we have our Millie Instagram handle. You can also follow us, whichever way. And on top, I think this leads you to our our LinkedIn or my LinkedIn profile. That's also for those of you, the students, or we have parents joining our, sessions a lot. So then we also share a lot of resources that's relevant for the students, parents, counselors on LinkedIn. So be sure to check that out and then, connect with me. All right, first things first. If you are interested in one-on-one or group tutoring through Millie, private chat me. The private chat may be disabled, so then use the Q&A chat to send it to us or message us like you saw. Next one, yes, this session will be recorded and it can be shared to you guys, so don't worry about those. And also one more thing I'm going to mention in a bit, I can share it in the chat room. There's a lot of questions about the SAT cancellation of the SAT essay portion, and then also the SAT subject test cancellation, as well as the test optional environment, obviously, that we are in. So for those of you, we're gonna share a WhatsApp group chat link in the chat room, and then that's where you can find out about our latest article, and all the answers there will be answered. 1 minute, let me pull that up. And then so I can, all right, I'm gonna stop share for now. Let me pull up that WhatsApp group. So this WhatsApp group is where we share a lot of our latest news, and then it's a way you can connect with Millie in a more, quickly. When you have questions, you can just message us, and then our community manager will answer you in the chat, right? Again, today our focus will be the SAT, main SAT test, and how to get good scores and how you can practice that. So anything related to test optional environment, do I even need to take it? And also number 2, about the SAT subject test cancellation and the essay section cancellation, refer to our WhatsApp group chat, and everything else will be shared there. Last but not least, I can answer your questions at the end of each section, because there were moments that, some of the sessions that we host, there's just so many questions that I cannot get through the material. So that's what we're going to do. All right, last but not least, another kind of like a plug is follow us on Instagram, and then there will be more university tips sharing there. Actually, on that note, at 11 a.m. Eastern time, so an hour and a half from now, we're hosting a FAQ Instagram live session on our internship program. Millie has an internship program throughout the year, and our summer internship application is closing in the next 4 days. And we got tons of interest. And this time we're going to use the 30 minutes on IG Live to answer any questions that students may have. Anyways, head over to our Instagram to find out everything. Okay, finally, let's go into the SAT. So, fundamental tips. So, some of the fundamental tips. What is SAT? Starting with that. And then a lot of the parents actually have these questions. So, SAT is a standardized test that's widely used in college admissions in the United States and select global universities. So, I want to highlight the part that's select global universities. Most students and parents and counselors know that SAT is used for the US. However, it's not as clear where else you can apply or use the SAT score. So we've done the research on this portion, and there's a lot of universities out there and countries that you can replace either the entrance exam, or you can serve as a supplemental information when you're applying to those universities. So I'll give you some of these examples. So if you're applying to UK universities through UCAS, there is a section that you can put SAT score as your reference or the supplemental test score. 1 UK, it's a huge. And for those of you who are living in the Middle East, a lot of the Middle Eastern, the GCC countries also take the SAT as the entrance requirement. Sometimes it's for the entire university, sometimes it's for the specific major. To give you some examples, many universities in Saudi take the SAT score. Depending on the subject, they may only look at the math score, or they may look at the math and English score. When I mentioned that they only look at the SAT math score, because some schools actually do the IELTS or other English proficiency test as their English requirement, and just look at the SAT math. So let's say SAT math 600 and above, then you can bypass certain tests that you need to take. We've also seen the Qatar University also take this approach, and many of the UAE universities you can also supplement. And it's needless to say, some of the satellite campuses that you see in the Middle East, such as Georgetown, Qatar, Northwestern Qatar, NYU, Abu Dhabi, they're all going through, you can consider them as US universities because they go through the same process of applying on the Common App, etc. Now, what other universities out there? We also have research on this, so we can share the whole list. Join our WhatsApp and follow us, and then you will get tons of these resources. What other universities? Some of the well-known ones are, let's say, Bocconi University in Italy, and you submit the SAT score. On their website, it says it's recommended that you have 1350 on the SAT, and that's kind of like the entrance requirement. If you also go to Hong Kong University or National University of Singapore, their bar is about the same as well, about 13 to 1400. So that's kind of like the bars there. And what else? Universities in Japan, Waseda University or Temple University in Japan, they both take the SAT. So yeah, tons of examples. So long story short, what's the lesson here? Is if you are thinking about studying overseas or targeting some of these global universities meaning a lot of times taught in English, then taking the SAT is not a bad idea, even in the test optional environment, okay? And in the past, there's about 2.2 million students from class of 2020, class of 2019 took the test, and there's about 5 to 7 test dates available. And for these 5 to 7 test dates, one thing I want to highlight is when you go sign up for the SAT test on the College Board, make sure that you go into the international registration route, because there's always about 1 to 2 more test dates available for the US, excuse me, US students. So let's check that out. So go here. You want to go into the international SAT registration section, okay? And then if you look at the SAT registration section for 2020 to 2021, there has been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 test date. Why is 8 test date? Because of COVID, some of the tests dates were canceled, so they added. But typically, it's not the case in terms of the numbers. If you're class of 2022, you should be registering right now to take the May exam here. And then, so let's look at the next year. So 2021 and 2022 cycle. As you can see, it's anticipated and they open registration during the summer. And there's 5 test dates total, right? And, we're not going to look at the US test dates, but US test date, typically you have 6 to 7 test dates. So make sure you go to the international site. Okay, and SAT is still paper-based as opposed to ACT. You can do most times computer-based, but still some tests you can do it on a paper-based. Any questions? Send it into the Q&A. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move on to the next. So next part is, I think, something that we really, really highlight, and then something that I wish that I knew when I was younger in your age, going through this process. Then I may have not stressed as much about that 10 points, or, not just brute force studying, right? One thing that we highlight is how the scoring is done and understand what the score means when you even study on your own. So some of the very common questions that we get asked from the parents and the student is this: oh, if I get one question wrong, how many points off is that? Or is math, like, if I get 3 questions wrong, does that mean it's like 50 points off? So the answer is, there's no such thing as X question equals Y points off, because College Board use this thing called relative scoring. So your score is not on the absolute scale. Absolute scale meaning this, what you are probably used to at school. You have 20 questions and then you would get 19 of them right, then you get 95, because each question equates 5 points. SAT, what it does is relative scale on a they score you on a relative scale, and then it depends on how well you did amongst your peers. So let's look at this chart below. This chart is what's called normal distribution chart. It's a bell curve chart, right? Some of you, if you're class of 2022 or class of 2021, you may have learned. If you're in advanced statistics, you may have learned this. But think of this chart as how much of the students are fitting into each bucket. So SAT, you can get another, I guess, like the fun fact about SAT. I think a lot of people know that perfect score is 1600, which is 800 times 2. In math section, 800, English section, 800. But not many people know that actually the lowest score you can get is 400. You can never get 0, by the way, because your scoring is anywhere from 200 to 800. Yeah. I bet many of you didn't know about this. I feel like looking back at it, I didn't know about this either in high school. So both subjects, in each subject, you can get anywhere from 200 to 800, right? And then you multiply that by twice 2, English and math, so you will get to 400 to 1600. That's the score range you can get. And think of this percentage as where you would fit in. If you've taken Millie's SAT diagnostic, and then if you've gotten scores anywhere from 800 to 1200, that's very normal, because that means there's about 70% of the students fitting here, right? And let's say that you got higher than 1200 here. That means there's about 15% of the students here. You performed as a top 15% out of the crowd. So let's say that there is 1,000 students who took the test, then College Board would grade everyone, like how many questions you got right or wrong, and then they would put everyone in an order. So the ones who got the least questions wrong, all the way down to the ones who got most questions wrong. If you are on the top 150, 15%, then your score will be higher than 1,200. If you are top 2%, 20 students out of these 1,000, then you would get 1,400. Who gets the perfect score? So perfect score here, it's about 0.1%. So out of 1,000 students, only one student would get a perfect score. Okay, so another thing that I always ask is, there's these numbers that people throw out there. I want to see the show of the hands, if you've heard of anyone saying like, to get into Ivy League, you got to get 1,500 and above, or say like 1,400 is a good score. Raise your hand if you've heard of this kind of, like, I don't know, messages or someone making these things. And then you kind of wonder, it's like, why is it 1,400? Or like someone says, it's like, oh no, but 1,350 is a good score. Or like 1,450 is a good score. Like, like where is this coming from? So this chart explains those kind of explanations, right? So like I said, if you hear that 1,400 is a good score, a lot of people do say this. So look at this, 1,400 is here. That means you're top 2%. If you, again, back to the 1,000 student analogy, out of 1,000 students, you are top 20, that's a pretty good score, right? So that's why people say that 1,400 is a good score. Then why do people say to get into Ivy League, you need to have 1,500 and above? Let's put a bar here, 750 times 2, 1,500. Just looking at it, maybe it's about 1%, less than 1%, right? Again, obviously, to think about Ivy League, you should be like top 1% in terms of the performance. So it does make sense when people say those things. It is so important, not just follow why people say these random numbers and then why you should be like aiming that number. Know that there's a reasoning behind this, and also know how difficult it is to get those numbers. So don't beat yourself up if you are not quite there when you're starting out. It's very normal for anyone to start here. Yeah, so that's one thing I wanted to highlight here. Any questions so far? So that's basically like how to interpret SAT. And then the next section I'm gonna get into is like section breakdowns, and then look at some of the how you should allocate the time. No questions? Okay, then move on to the next one. And for those of you who are interested in taking the SAT diagnostic test, we have monthly SAT diagnostic test that has more than 400 students participate each month. And we have one in April, on April 24th on Saturday. And it's always 9 a.m. Arabian Standard Time. And so that's like if you're in Qatar, if you're in Saudi, that's 9 a.m. If you're in UAE and Turkey, that's 10 a.m. For those of you who are in Asia, it's about 1 to 2 p.m. your time. If you're interested, again, join the WhatsApp group. And then on our Instagram also, you'll find a link that you can sign up to our test. Test is free, by the way. So the next section here is where I want to talk about the your section breakdown. So important again, right? And why? Many of the students coming to take the SAT for the first time, they don't even know how many minutes that they have in each section. And then if that's the case, it's likely that you're going to run out of time because you don't know what you're dealing with, how many questions you're dealing with. And use this as your advantage, meaning that know this going in, so you know what to expect. A lot of people don't even know the test takes like about 3.5 hours when you go in, right? So know these facts. Let's look at this. So section 1 and 2 are the English sections. Combining 1 and 2, that's your 800 points, right? Section 3 and 4 make up your math section. That makes another 800 points, okay? Section 1 and 2, reading section, English reading section is a bit of an equivalent to English literature if you're doing AP. And section 2, writing, is close to English language if you're doing AP. Same thing for, I would say, if you're in IB also reading is more like English A, and then the writing is English B, meaning that reading is more like a literature and the literature comprehension versus the writing section is more grammar and then kind of like language composition of the things. Each section is takes up 400 points. So if you get a perfect score on reading, it's likely you are gonna get 400 points here. And then if you do nothing on the writing, then like I said, there's 200 points. That's like the baseline, right? So then you would get 100 points here for doing nothing. So then your score would be 500, right? Unlikely this is gonna happen. So writing section is also 400 points total, 800, right? Together. Math section is a little bit different. It's not like a section 3 is like 300 points and section 4 is like 500 points or like 400. What they do is just they add up the number of questions. There's 58 questions total, right? And then rank order them. And then depending on how many questions you got them right, that makes up the whole 800 points. So just looking at the sheer number of questions, you can think of this as section 3 makes up about 1.1/3 of your score, and section 4 makes up about 2/3 of your test score. That's important to know. And next part, what I want to bring your attention to is there's number of questions and then the time that you have allocated per each session. Each section have different amount of time allocated. And if you look at the 5th column where it says time per question, you also notice the time per question that's allocated is quite different. So section 2 writing, you have the least amount of time that's allocated for each question. And then section 4 that you have most amount of time that's allocated per question. Does that mean that you're most likely to run out of time in section 2 and most relaxed in section 4? Not necessarily, because the difficulties of the questions are different. And then the time allocated is determined based on that. And very, very generally speaking, I'm just generalizing it. Everyone's different, right? So if you're not as good at math, student run out of time in math. If you're not as good at English, then you're more likely to run out of time in English. But most generally speaking, section 1 is the section that most students run out of time with. That's because comparing section 1 and section 2, the article, the passage you need to read, and then the questions are much harder in section 1. Again, that's English literature versus second is English language. So it is hard to answer questions. And also for the math section, if you're good at math in school, typically students have enough time. If you struggle in math, then yeah, we've seen cases of students running out of time, but with some practice that can be fixed. In terms of like teaching and learning and kind of upgrading your scores, also the hardest part probably to up your scores is the section 1, because it's about literature, reading and the comprehension. One more thing I want to mention here is see the note section, that there's a number of passages here. What this means is so there's 5 passages, and there's like about a half page or to a full page of reading that you have. And then after that, you would have about 10 to 13 questions related to this passage. So instead of just looking at the time per question, obviously section 1 and 2, you need to think about time per passage, right? So you have 65 minutes total. So if you divide 65 minutes into 5 passages, then you have 13 minutes to spend on each passage. However, there's one passage, it's called double passage. So you have 2 people with different opinions. Let's say if it's, women's voting right. And then if it was written in 1800 or something, or early 1900, then one person could say like women should have a voting right, versus another person say women shouldn't have a voting right because their place is home, blah, 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 right? So this double passage questions or the passage is obviously, it takes a bit longer time to read because there's a bit longer text compared to single passage ones. So you want to allocate a bit more time. This is like a pro tip, by the way. So what does that mean? If you can spend about 10, 11 to 12 minutes on the single passage ones. So that makes up, let's say, if you spend 12 minutes, so that's 48 minutes total. And then that leaves you about 17 minutes to work on the double passage. Let's say you spend about 15 minutes on the double passage one. You have 2 minutes left because you have bubble sheet you need to fill out, etc. So that's how you should allocate the time here. When our suggestion, when you first start out with the SAT, very, very beginning, don't worry about the time limit. Just focus on solving the questions, right? So you don't want to be just like rushing and then, when you're tutored, whatever, you just like didn't even try the passage, and then you're gonna be hearing these answers or the explanation. It just doesn't mean anything. Initially, don't worry about the time frame, just do the questions. And after a certain point, now you feel comfortable, you are at about, let's say, like you understand what is going on, and now that's when you start timing. And then once you start timing, you need to see how many minutes you're overrun every single time. So we always like ask students to do this when you, even if you're not like sticking to the time, say like section 1, 80 minutes total, section 2, 50 minutes total, etc. So you can keep track of how fast you can solve the questions. So that's section 1 and 2. Section 2 is about the same, meaning there's 4 passages, split them into 4, these 35 minutes, meaning you need to spend about 8 minutes on each passage, and then that's how you should allocate your time. Section 3 and 4, the only thing I want to highlight is section 3 is with no calculator, section 4 is with a calculator, but does that mean in section 4 you need to use calculator for every single question? The answer is a no. A lot of times you can just use your pen and pencil and your brain to answer the questions. So I would say there's about like 1/3 of the questions that you should probably use the calculator to answer. The reason that I'm mentioning this is sometimes that using the calculator try to answer the question could take longer time. Just because you're like trying to make sure that you have the right answer, that could eat up the time. So don't waste time doing that. And if you know it's the right answer, just skip the calculator portion of it. Another thing I want to mention here is that there's these parts called grid-in questions. Some students are not familiar with this. So I'm gonna explain some samples here. So this is a multiple choice question, which is most questions in the math section. And here are some of the grid-in questions. There's 5 grid-in questions out of 20 in section 3, and there's 8 grid-in questions out of 38 questions in section 4. So grid-in questions, it's a bit like open-ended kind of answering scheme. Some of the key things I want to mention here is doesn't matter if you put in the answer 2/3 here or 2/3 here, doesn't matter. And if the essay College Board doesn't indicate if you're answering in a fractional format, they're expecting 3 decimal points. So here 0.666, 0.667. Now, what is Millie's guidance suggestion? Every time whenever you can answer things in a fractional format, answer in a fractional format, as opposed to answering in a decimal format. Why? Because it's cleaner and it's clear. Some of you may be like, let's say this particular case, the answer is 2/3. You can answer it as 2/3 or 0.666, 0.667. Let's say you answered it as like 0.667, and you know it's right because it's like 0.6666. So if you round and it's 0.667, but you may come out of the test thinking like, oh shoot, maybe should I have done 0.666, or should I have put in like 0.67? Like, did I do something wrong? You may have this kind of like weird conversation going on in your head, although you know that you did it correctly. So to avoid this kind of feeling of like, did I answer it correctly? Did I circle it correctly? If you can answer in a fractional format, there's no such confusion, right? 2/3 is 2/3. There's no other way you can like answer this question. So for those reasons, definitely answer in a fractional format when possible. Another thing that I want to mention here is very simple, but some of you may think that why is it why there's no zero in the front, 0.666. So in the like American math system, and then also I think the UK math system as well, you don't need to put zero. And then people just like skip that part of zero. And when you say it's like 0.1, meaning 0.1, but this could confuse a lot of students because I'm from Korea. In Korea, we always say 0.1, and also we know students in other countries like Italy, like you always say 0.1, but know that in the US there's no, if the first digit is a zero, then you don't need to say it. So hence there's no zero in the beginning. So very, very minor, small things, but something to definitely keep in mind. Okay, so that's now everything about the structure of the test. We looked at how the scoring is done, how many students are taking the test, and what kind of universities that you can use these scores for. And now you looked at the different sections and then how the times are allocated. We also talked about how you should study in the beginning. Don't limit yourself to the time limit, right? You time it, but then don't limit it. And then after a certain point, then you should try to reduce the time that you spend in each section. So these are all the fundamental tips that we have. Is everything clear so far? Raise your hand if everything's clear. All right, so let's move on to the next section, which is the strategic section. This is some of, I guess, like pro tips or the study tips that Millie offers. So first is focus on the subject that you're good at. Until your score gets to about 1250, focusing on your strength subjects as opposed to weaker subject will give you a quicker boost to your score. This could be very counterintuitive to a lot of students, right? Because we are so trained, we are so like, I don't know, like told to think that you should focus on things that you're not good at, right? So meaning, oh, I'm not good at bio, I should spend more time on bio. This is like a typical notion of studying. However, when you think about SAT, you should focus on the subject that you're good at. Why is that? Look at this example. This is the global average. Typically, the global average is about 1,000 to 50, 1,000, 60, 70. Right. So let's say you started at 500, 500. So that's pretty normal. And then let's say you have 40 hours to study. And during these 40 hours, you're good at English and you decided to spend, let's say, 35 hours to study English. Because you like English, things started making sense and you want to sort of study more because it starts making sense, and then you'll make more progress this way. And this along the way, because now you're familiar with the time and etc., you study math a little bit on the side, so your math score goes up a little bit as well. In this case, you will have 1250 in this particular example. The exact same student, let's say, spend time on math as opposed to English, right? You don't like math, it's so annoying, you don't understand part of it, and it's just like frustrating, you don't want to study. Now, the same student ends up with 1150, right? So notice how if you were to think about the efficiency of your time, focusing on the stronger subject, it's going to give you a higher, quicker boost in the beginning. Now, does that mean that after 1250, you just only study the subject you're good at? No. After 1250, that's when you are going to focus on the weaker subject, right? You can only go up so much after 700. Even if you get 800 here, then if the other subject is 500, 550, then you are only going to get to 1350, right? So that's when you start thinking about the other subject. But until then, focus on your subject that you're good at. Next one is answer all the questions, even if you don't know the answer. Super simple, but obviously we get these questions all the time. Is there a penalty for getting a wrong answer? These questions are so, although College Board clearly states that there's no penalty, students still ask these questions because there's a lot of different other tests that gives penalty for wrong questions, right? So for instance, like TOEFL, if you get a question wrong, and then it will show you a easier question, whatnot. So, and then you will get points off. SAT, there's no such thing. So guess every single question. Next one is study at least 6 hours before the exam day. This could be like, I guess, like so obvious that you should be spending time. But when they say to study 6 hours before, College Board means study SAT specifically 6 hours, right? Not like I studied math 6 hours before. Study the SAT style math 6 hours or English 6 hours before. And here's a study that's done by the Khan Academy and College Board that students who spend more than 6 hours performed 90 points higher than the students who did not study 6 hours with their tool. So the same study also shows that students who studied 20 hours or more scored 115 points higher than the students who didn't study. Now, so this is in math, what's called diminishing return. Diminishing return meaning that, don't you think this chart is a bit misleading? Misleading in a sense that you studied 6 hours and then you got 90 points up, and you studied 14 more hours and you only got 25 points more. Right? Like if you do the math, it should be like going up much more, meaning that you probably have gained a lot of knowledge and then kind of, like the initial strategy by studying 6 hours. So Millie's recommendation is this: whether you study with Millie on a one-on-one tutoring, group tutoring, which we offer, or not, study 6 hours on your own and see how you feel. And if you think that you can continue to study on your own, go ahead. You will have a really good score. There's a lot of online resources you can do. But then after 6 hours, it's like, there's no way I'm going to sit down and study this on my own. Like, I just don't understand how things are going. Then think about other ways to study at this point. The other ways to study could be group tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, studying with your friends, create a study group, things like that. And in terms of the tutoring that we offer, is some schools, they actually come to us and then we create a group class for that particular school. Then we can stick to the school schedule, and then you meet twice a week or 3 times a week with your classmates. Those of you who are interested, we offer classes like that. But our normal classes are just, we put students into the same group that has the same performance level. So we have 2 types of courses. 1200 and above is going to go into one type of class, and then the 1200 and below is going to another class based on the diagnostic results. But within that also, we allocate students differently based on, like your grade and etc. So that is the point here. Study 6 hours and see how you feel about your studying style. Next one, this is a second to the last tip, is review the SAT score use policy for each university. So class of 2023, class of 2022, don't think it's too early for you guys. And think about your schools, dream schools. It's good to have about 10 to 20 on your list when you're starting out. And then that way you can apply to about 7 to 10 when you're actually applying, right? So put down 10 to 20 schools and then go to their website and see how their SAT use policy is, right? And then, so you can adjust, you can plan ahead how you should be performing. The good news is most schools do this thing called super scoring, meaning they look at the highest score of each section. So let's say this particular student who took the test twice, and then for the schools that do super scoring, her final score is 1300, right? You got the higher English score here, higher math score here, so that's 1300 here. Now, the next popular one is called single highest test date score. This is more like a normal, what we are used to, right? So out of these 2 tests, second one she did better, so the school looks at the higher score in total. Third type is for all scores required for review. Very few schools do this, for instance, like Stanford, and that means they're just going to look at every single score that you've gotten. So now at this point, the questions that we get asked is it all the good schools doing these all scores required for review and only like the not so good schools do super scoring? The answer is a no. Most Ivy League schools also do super scoring. Hence, you should plan ahead and try to take the test a couple of times so that you can utilize the super scoring scheme. So we go to a lot of the admissions sessions, like before COVID in person, and Columbia, Cornell, Princeton. During the session itself, when we met with the admissions officers, they did say clearly that they do super scoring. Yeah. So any questions so far? This is the last slide that I'm going to share with you guys today, and after that, I'm going to stay on for 3 more minutes for Q&A. Otherwise, we're going to end the session. Last tip is kind of related to the earlier tip, which is take the SAT twice and take the AP course if it's offered. Any of you who's in an AP system school, raise your hand. Yeah, not many, right? Because we've seen most of our students are in the IB or A-level program. IB is not like the most popular, I guess, curriculum internationally. But so don't worry about the AP section. If your school doesn't offer AP, there's no reason for you to go out of your way try to study AP. But the reason, so then let's just look at the why take the SAT twice. College Board says 2 out of 3 students who take the SAT again improve their score. And then it's a bit self-explanatory, right? If you take it multiple times, you're gonna get better at it. But it's good to know that there's actual study, and the study shows, the results shows that 2 out of 3 students do better second time. Here, College Board suggestion is taken in once during the junior year and then once in the senior year. Our suggestion, Millie's suggestion, is get done with everything in before the end of junior year. So once in the fall of junior year, and then once in the spring of junior year. The reason for this is doing the application and essay writing and collecting information for the admission cycle, it's a no joke, and you really don't have time to study your senior, IB2, A-level, or AP subjects, to write 10 essays and then also study for the SAT. You have no time. So definitely get it over with during the junior year. So then during the summer, you can do internship, you can do volunteer work, you can start writing your essays, you can think about the university list. Maybe you want to prep a little bit in your IB 2 years, your AP subjects, your A-level subjects, whatnot. Do all those things, and then you get started. Then you would have a much, how do I say, like pleasant senior year that going in. All right, I see one question coming in. I'm gonna answer that question right after this. Okay, and the second reason why is obviously because you can do super scoring. We talked about super scoring. Yeah, that's everything today that I wanted to share. Let me look at the questions that came in. For whatever reason, sometimes Zoom doesn't let me to see the questions. All right, so the question here is, my country does not offer AP. What can replace the subject tests? Okay, good question, Mira. So the subject tests are now canceled. They discontinue this type of test. Again, Mira, I think it's good for you to join our group chat, and then we'll share that article there. So no more subject tests. So that's one thing. And then your country doesn't offer AP, and then what can you replace? Okay, let me think about how to answer this question. If you are in an IB or a A-level program, then you can just submit those. Your transcript will work as the subject test score because it shows you're in chemistry, whatnot. So let me know if this is the case, then you're taken care of. If you're in a local program, local system, it's a bit more tricky. I think it's good to kind of consult with one of our counselors. We have free 15-minute chat, so then we can answer these questions more in depth. Next question, or Aisha said, can I please get the recording of this session? Yes, we can share the recording of this session. All right, any more questions here? And for those of you, if you haven't signed up for our April SAT diagnostic test, head over to our Instagram, and then under the link in bio, there's a link to sign up for the April SAT session, SAT diagnostic session. So you can do that. All right. Any more questions? No questions? So that's everything, guys. Then thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys in our next session. All right.